Hello and welcome to the third edition of the QA show. I'm here joined by Canuck Soldier, Jack the Narrator, and Von Holio, and today we're gonna have a interesting discussion about the new, better balanced starts mod we're gonna have out in probably a week or so. Uh, in the meantime, I would like to do some quick announcements and tell you about the 10-minute waiting period that the player needs to have if he drops from a game. Majority vote of the remaining players could allow a player back in if they took longer than 10 minutes. However, if a player does not return within the 10 minutes, the remaining players must vote to CC or to scrap the game. A majority vote can decide to spend a maximum of 10 minutes trying to find a substitute player. As a last result, the game must be continued with an AI. The 3-drop policy. Each player, including the host, gets 3 penalty-free disconnects from the game. After the 3rd drop, the host can refuse to let you back in the game. The host has the final authority on that decision. If someone is not let back into the game by the host, the remaining players must vote to CC or to scrap the game. The CVFR tournament on the 18th of November has been fully updated and announced, and there are already 40 plus teams registered on the tourney.cvfr.com website. I'm gonna link to you in the CPL Q&A channel and general chat probably in a short while. Really excited to see what the tournament will bring. There has been a small amendment to the sub rule change. A sub has officially joined the game after ending their first turn. Up until that point, they are free to leave a game that they subbed into. This means that you should take your time and understand the position you are subbing into, because you're locked into the game after you end your turn. Also, I would like to remind every player, smurfing or circumventing our punishment system is a permaban offense. We do not like it. We are a no-quit community. We started like this and we want to keep it like this. So I would like now to switch to the discussion at hand of today, the new Better Balance Starts mode with Jack. Hello, Jack.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, thanks for coming, man. As far as I know, you've done a great job with the new Better Balanced Starts mode. Can you tell us a bit about it? How did you first had the idea to improve it, and then?
Sure. Well, basically, about 6 months ago, I discovered CPL. I guess pretty much like everyone, I was tired of games where people are quitting all the time, and someone I don't remember in a game said you should check those guys. Essentially, the idea of BBS arrived about 2 months ago. I was playing with Mali. Was getting destroyed in FFA, and somehow I was kind of blaming my start, and because obviously I was starting on grassland, and I was saying I don't understand, and I never start on desert right with Mali, and obviously therefore my trade is a bit useless, and someone pointed out that you can't actually spawn in desert or in tundra. With the current BBS. So I ended up going into the BBS feedback page, and I asked Code Note and whatnot, and they told me, well, indeed you can't because it's prevented by the mode. So therefore no one can spawn in it, and it's better like this. And the reason it's designed like this is because we cannot find another way. And for me it was a little bit of a all my beer moment, right? So I say, okay, how come you can't do that? And it turns out that it's been a while, but 15 years ago I was modding quite a bit on C4. Because of work, I couldn't do it with C5, and I stopped doing it. And I look at the files, and I say, oh, well, that's very similar to C4. I mean, it's not in Python, it's in Lua, so I don't know this language, but it's very close, essentially. And I tried to tinker with the files and trying to find a way. And this was about 3 to 4 weeks ago. The first iterations were a bit awful, to be fair. And what was great is that the community on CPL was very useful. I mean, really, you have Vonelio, Eiffel, G, all those guys, even the guys at CVFR, try to help out. I don't think it was because they felt that BBS was bad. It's just they thought, well, if we can do something better, let's try. And I would say about 40 to 50 iteration after the first one, we start to have something which is much more stable, that is much closer to the original BBS. Because the idea for me is to get something which is more of an update, right? So keeping the same feel, keeping the same idea of getting a game where everyone is going to have a balanced start, but adding bits and pieces, like adding the ability for Mali to spawn on desert, adding the ability to Russia to spawn on tundra, fixing a couple of bugs. And about a week ago, Codenote essentially started to look at it a bit more seriously. And the best example of this collaboration is this morning send me a file, something that I overlooked, that the original BBS was affecting the terrain composition. So it was reducing the size of deserts and snow. And I played this morning, and now we're getting something which is very, very close to the original in terms of feel, but with a much better stability. So you can't get an settler crash, for instance, and with a better balance. So I'm happy. It's still a beta, so it's still not an official update, but the idea for me, and I guess for everyone, would be to reach a point where this become the new updated version
I'm
of BBS.
I'm a bit curious about how it works exactly and how is it different from the last BBS we have been using. I understand
Sure.
yours is doing a little bit of terraforming around the civilization or around the spawn, let's say.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna go full nerd, but essentially, the main problem you have with the first BBS is, which is not a problem really, it's just a design decision. So when Waza and Conode first did this one, they went on the original Firaxis file and they tinkered with it in order to essentially, I would not say it's better balance, but it's more like better start. So essentially, you will prevent anyone from spawning into Tundra and the desertic area of the map, and you will ensure they will get a certain number of tutus around their spawn, right? So essentially, the algorithm is looking around the spawn and adding, doing a little bit of terraforming, if anything, and adding a little bit of, deers, forest, and a forested hill, and that's it. Now, the reason why Waza did not initially put the ability for civilization to spawn on desert when they had this bias is simply because he can't really do it on the file without making massive changes. And then if you start making massive changes, the game, the mod becomes very difficult to maintain, because every single time Firaxis will change a file, you will have to try to figure out what it impacts here. And bear in mind that this specific file, this assigned start plot file, is very sensitive, because essentially if there is a bug there, the game is crashing and that's it. You can't start. So from a design perspective, the new BBS is structured in a very different way. So first of all the balancing is done in a script format. So again, it's a bit technical, but um, it's exactly the same way the scenarios are working. So if you have the new, battle royale type, Red Death or Red Plague, I don't remember the name, it's going to be scripted, which means that the game is technically already generated. You already have the map, right? And then you can affect the map. So that's one part of the mod is doing that, and that's the balancing aspect of it. But what is even more interesting is that the other part of the mod is not located in the assigned starting plot of Firaxis. It's actually before that. So the mod is editing essentially the map script of the file, the continent.lula, for instance. And what it does is that it first try to place the civilization, um, according to the bias, but it's in a more optimal way than the fear access version. So it's going to look at, for instance, Canada or Egypt, and it's going to say, well, Egypt, it wants to spawn on floodplains and it wants to spawn next to river, and then it's going to look at every single tile on the map and give them a score depending of it's close to a river or it's close to a floodplain. And that way, essentially, you're going to make a first layer of trying to spawn where you should be spawned. Now, because CPL has specific rules regarding proximities between civilization, if this is failing, instead of doing like the old BBS no circular type of bug, then the algorithm is going to fall back on the original fear axis one and check again if you can place a civilization based on this rule. And it means that you will get basically your distances that are right, but suddenly you can again spawn on tundra. You don't want that. So then what's happening is that the game is generated, and we go back to your point, Michael, about terraforming, because now you can be, for instance, Greece and in the middle of tundra. The game is going to try to address that by modifying the entire area which is around your spawn. So in the first version of the betas, this was just literally your three circle around your cities, and obviously it was not very nice looking, but obviously it was a beta, so I needed to spend more time to fix that. And now essentially it's going to basically change the entire continent to ensure that you are not on tundra if you're Greece, or you are not in the middle of desert if you are Russia, for instance.
But it is not guaranteed 100%. There is still that level of chance you get, right, for the spawns. As far as we've seen when we tested it and put it side by side, actually Von Holio did a great job remapping on the same seed and watching the difference.
Yeah. But normally today you can't start in the middle of tundra if you are a non-tundra civ with the last versions. Actually, it's still not slick, I would say. If you start really in the middle of tundra, so you're completely surrounded by tundra, you will have a specific function in the new BBS, which is called a polar start, because you're close to the polar cycle essentially, and it's gonna change every single tile on your continent, tundra toward plain and snow toward tundra, which is kind of warming the continent up. And that is obviously if you are Greece, or if you are, I would say, if you are not Russia and if you're not Canada. You can have up to 2 tundra tile within your 3 radius of your cities, and then after that level, the algorithm is going to try to fix it.
Okay. Well, my personal concern is that overpowered civs like Russia spawning always in tundra would be a problem because at the moment we don't ban it all of the time because we know there is a chance that like a 40% chance it will spawn in let's say grassland. So basically it's not the same power level as it would if it spawned in tundra.
Yeah. So today, essentially, you are not guaranteed to spawn according to your bias because, like in the original game, you have a level of randomness. So if you're picking Russia, and Vanolia will be able to confirm it, you will not be guaranteed to spawn on tundra. You can be in the middle of the map, but you are guaranteed to get a good start no matter what, because the way and that's something that is about a week ago, and it was due to the discussion I had with Braze. So initially, what the mod was doing, it was looking at every single spawn of every single player and saying, all right, within the first 2 circles around your city start, we're going to make a calculation of how much food you have, how much production you have, and then we're going to decide that if you are 20% below that average or 40% above that average, you will get corrected in order to not have crazy starts for one player and very crappy start for other players.
But
this was the first thing.
The average of the current map seed and the current spawns, right? That's the...
Yes, so it looks at... of the current one, and this was the first thing. But then after, what Bryce told me, he said, well, listen, Um, I love the mode. It obviously fair for everyone, but then the problem is that when you look at old BBS, we kind of addicted to our tutus now. So we want. Plus, it's multiplayer, and it's those
We
are
want
long
it to be
games.
faster. Yes.
Exactly, exactly. So, based on that, and this is about again a week ago, what we did is that we tested minimal value in order to be sure that you will have. And I'm talking about standard, obviously, because if you want, you can put resources to abundant, and then obviously you will have crazy spawns because the algorithm is taking into account as well what parameters you're using. But if you're on standard, what it does as well is that it's going to look at the minimum, a hard minimum number of food you have around your start, which means that if you are starting and you have less than two tiles that give you two foods, and that is taking into account your trays like if you're Mali and you will have +1 food for the desert tile. If you are Canada, I think with BBS you have +2 or +1 for tundra star. So I'm taking that into account, and then you're gonna get round of bonuses being distributed in your spawn. So quite similar to what BBS is doing, and that's the first thing. The second thing, which was actually inspired by Eiffel, which is about what is a balanced start compared to another player. And he pointed out something very true that I'm an average player, so I don't I'm spend a lot of time, but I'm more and more a seeming type of player. I'm not super competitive about it. And the first thing he told me is that, well, 20% is way too high. I really want not more than 10% dispersion between the spawns. Um, and so we tried 10%, but then the trick is that he was still not happy. Saying, well, 10% doesn't really matter because what matters to me is that sometimes you can have a 1-2 and then a 2-1 and then a 3-1, and it kind of compensates. But in some of the times, if I'm just surrounded by some great tiles but I don't have enough food, I can't really use them, so therefore I'm at the disadvantage. So what we did is something different, is that on top of what I just described before, i.e., you have a minimum guaranteed food and you have like balanced global food and balanced global production with the other players. What the algorithm is going to do is that it's going to look at every single tile there is around every single spawn within your starting ring, so the six tiles around you, and it's gonna score every one of them based on production 1.5 points, food 1 point, gold 0.5 points. I think culture, if you have a culture luxury, is gonna be, I think, +1.5 or +2. I don't remember exactly. And then there is fate as well and science. And it does a scoring. It looks at the best two tiles, and then is going to ensure that no player has less than 10% in terms of scores than any others, which means that then you're going to go back to the old BBS type of starting to generate a couple of forested 2-2s or 3-1s or 1-3, depending on the other player. You will have more it will be more balanced than the previous BVS, obviously, because if everyone has, let's say, 4-2s, you would get 4-2s, so you would not. If everyone has a crazy start, you would get a crazy start too, right?
Yeah.
But if everyone has just 1-2-2 and one, let's say 2-1, you will get 1-2-2 and 1-1. If you see
But
what
it
I
can
mean.
bring it down as well. Like if some player has, like, let's say, three spices in his
Yes,
cap, it will
yes, yes.
cut or delete one or two of those spices.
Exactly. Well, I'm not going to delete luxuries. As a matter of fact, it's quite rare that you have luxury on the spawn. But the way it's going to work is that player probably is going to have less forest around, so it's going to be less chops, for instance. And it's only in when there is really extreme starts that I start deleting stuff. But I never delete luxuries or strategic resources because then it starts to become really a mess because luxuries and strategy resources, they have like the important item on the map. Speaking about which, there is another thing that the mod is doing. which is bug fixing. So all oversight from PRXs. So one thing that that happened is that obviously in yeah,
You're breaking up a little bit there.
yeah, better.
Hey Jack, I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit. Not sure about what's happening here. I did see two things I did notice when I loaded the how to say, the mod on my PC, and I played a little bit with it in single player. I did notice you included two new buttons in the new create game.
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit, Michael. Can you say that again?
You were both breaking up there, but I switched servers for voice.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it better now? Oh, yeah, I can hear you better now.
I can hear you very well now.
Oh,
Perfect.
great. Okay, I was saying that I've noticed when I was playing around with the mod, two new buttons that you included in the create game menu. One is force remaps,
Yeah.
and the other one is I forgot what it is.
So at the moment it's still a beta, and as I know Vonaleo has been kind enough to test this beta since the very beginning, and because it's a beta, there are still some options at the end, probably going to be hidden in order to control some of the elements of the game. So, for instance, at the beginning, you had sliders to to control how many resources you will add, or this type of thing. So, at the moment, the two toggle you have is one that is just from yesterday, which is to test the Terran parameters that CodeNote has provided to the mod. So the idea is that by default it's ticked, so you play using the classic BBS parameter, but when you're testing it, you can just untick the box and then generate immediately the other map with. So those are more for like testing purposes.
So that is not a force remap in case the mod fails.
No. It's not. It's not to. To be fair, I'm touching wound speaking, and I don't want to bring bad karma on me, but the mod is actually pretty stable. You can try that. You can essentially force max out the number of players and city states on a small map, and it's going to be very hard to crash it, and that's because of the layered approach. While the old BBS obviously is going to very quickly give you a no-settler bug and just crash. Now, one thing that Code asked me to put in place, and that's a very extreme scenario, is that there is a force remap option, and the force remap option is designed that if for whatever reason after all those layers, the players are still too close to one another, you will just start the game because the game can't crash in the current state, which I think is a big plus. So you will enter the game, and then when you enter the game, you have an error message saying, "Hey, you're too close to other. You need to remap as per CPL rules," and it kills all the player. It's a bit dramatic, but the point of Code was that if you don't have this, some people will still try to bully the other into playing the game because they have a great spawn and so on. So to be fair, to get this trigger in a game, you really need to put crazy settings in. So normally this will never happen, but this is just a failsafe to ensure there are no toxicity in the game, and I think it's a good thing.
Well, essentially it does save up around 30 minutes of game time until you actually find out you're really close to someone, and then do the remap vote and convince everyone that you should remap and everything that entails.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a smart addition, and some people, because it's competitive, they can get quite aggressive, especially because it's the internet and it's easier than if you are in the real world.
yeah, I can totally understand that. Also, we were kind of happy, quote unquote, with the no settler bug because it didn't like it saved us a bit of time, maybe let's say 5 or 10 minutes. We knew instantly that we need to relobby.
Yeah.
Uh, but this is a lot better, and if we get a message that the mod is working perfectly or the mod couldn't get into the proper conditions for the game to be played, that's awesome. That's actually a great improvement.
I think you are gonna see far less crashes in terms of no settler bugs, because since you have the algorithm is run twice, so the old BBS, to be fair, is, I mean, I know some people could be quite vocal and say, "Hey, it's not stable," blah blah blah, but it's actually not that bad, objectively speaking. Especially, I mean, given that if you're being objective, the Firaxis core code is riddled with bugs, right? And when you start modding, you can find those functions that are broken and everything. So the original mode is not crashing that much, but obviously this new version will be much more stable in a sense that um, when I try to crash it voluntarily, it's actually hard for me to get there. I need to at least generate like 20 maps with crazy settings to finally get no settler bug, and I need for that to be like archip. Technically, I don't even get a no settler bug. The map is generated. It's just that one player is going to be too close to another, and for this, it's
So he actually spawns, but it is not in the correct
yeah,
conditions.
exactly. But for this, I'm talking about, I don't know, 20 players, 24 city states, archipelagos, and high sea level, right? To really ensure that it's almost impossible for the game to place every
Yes,
single player on the map.
something that will probably never happen in here.
Hopefully, yes. But the idea as well is that this is designed for CPL, but you never know what's going to be the new favorite map of the players. And when I arrived, everyone was just, which was only 6 months ago, everyone was just saying, "Oh, it's just Pangea, that's it." And now I see Seven Seas being used quite a bit, and tomorrow you could be, I don't know, maybe archipelago is going to be the next thing, I don't know, but the idea is that the mod is resilient to be able to handle as well those other maps that are a bit more tricky.
That's great. Actually, in the last week, I've seen continents and islands getting some headway in here, and and more players want to play it. Especially after Fireaxis did the improvements on the sea tiles, and of course with the BBG we did it as well.
Yeah.
The naval civs are a lot a lot more fun to play than they were in the last versions. So it's always nice to get a Dido or a Norway or a England.
Yeah, I love Dido personally. I fully agree with you. One thing that goes actually into your direction, and this was a suggestion from G. I mean, to be fair, he has been working a lot, like Von. Both of you guys have done a tremendous job in playing with this game, using it. I mean, he's using it almost in every single of his steamers, and with no crash, and always some good feedback and saying, well, maybe here it would have been good to have a little bit less or a little bit more of this or that. And one thing that is suggested to do in this new version, which I included, is including the detailed world version of the maps. So when you, and it's probably not going to be that big, except from 4G and his steamers that he likes to play on CPL with those type of maps. But essentially, those maps are a more detailed version of the original script from Firaxis. So you can have like a Pangea Plus when you select them, and those will be like your normal Pangea map. But if you look at it, um, the the contour of the continent, I mean the big one continent, is going to be more detailed. So you're going to see little islands and things like that, which could be cool if you like to play naval on Pangea, because sometimes being Dido on Pangea is not that fun, because guess what? There is not so much on the side of the on the side of that big continent, but using that script, it could be interesting.
That was nice to see. I actually use the detailed worlds mod in some private games that I play with friends outside of CPL. It was neat to see that you included that.
So that is the plus things that is from the mod.
Yeah.
I've noticed it in the map selection screen, but I didn't know it was from the mod.
Yes. So essentially, in term of you know maintaining the mode and what it affects, what I was able to do is basically all the Firaxis core files aren't touched, except the map scripts, and the reason is because, and the rationale behind it, because if Firaxis wants to do a new map, it's just issue a new script, right? Whereas, for instance, when they try to do the tilt axis map or the primordial new map, they are changing their original core file. So you don't want to touch the core file, but it's safe to tinker with the scripts. And in this, if you open the file and you're a bit nerdy and you want to figure out how I did it, basically I do a protected call toward my function within that script. So it tests it to see that it will run, and then if it runs safely, it's going to launch it, right? So
this
it means
is what Code mentioned when he said that it's gonna be well, first of all, a lot easier to update and maintain from version to version, and I mean the base core version.
Yes, this is, to me, as I'm talking more about maintaining something, because people come and go, right? The problem you have is that when you mod for a game, and this was a big problem with Civ4, and this is where I got the idea from, literally, is that you initially Civ4 at modding out of the box like everyone is doing in Civ6, and then after I think probably 5 years, you had modular modding coming into place, and this changed everything. And this is the spirit of what I'm doing here, is that when you open that file continent, what you have is that you look at the top and you will see that I'm calling instances of other Lua file. And within the instances, anything that has been touched is going to be separated, meaning that if Firaxis wants to change completely the way they generate the terrain, for instance, or the resource or whatever, or the natural wonders, they can change a file and it's not going to impact the mod whatsoever. You're going to benefit immediately from the improvement. The only thing you need to do really is that if you want to include a new map script, then you just need to be sure that you introduce those protected calls to those functions in that map script. And this is quite easy to do. You can just copy what I did on the other one if I'm dead tomorrow. You see what I mean? So it's easy. You just need to be careful about what type of map script you're introducing. So some are a bit more difficult and could cause crashes. So initially, I put perfect word that probably a lot of people that play C4, C3 are aware of, because it's a very old map script. The problem is that the Civ6 version tends to generate bugs. So I first put it in and then I realized it was bugging, so I just dropped it out. But you get detailed words in CPL if you want to.
I did talk to Waza a few days ago and asked him if he can come on the show. I would really like to see what were his concerns, because I know he had a few weeks ago, before you actually started to work on this, he knew there were some problems with the actual with the BBS he made, but he didn't know exactly how to solve them. And maybe you accidentally or on purpose solved those issues, and I think it would benefit all of us if we had the discussion live.
Of course, yes.
Can we get him in here somehow? Von Kanak? I'm not sure exactly where he is. He was on the Civ Rus, right?
Looks like he's playing.
He said something about manhandling him in here. Also, Code, I know we talked a bit about this a few days ago, and you said something about Jack actually solved all your concerns?
Yeah, he solved pretty much all the concerns that I've thrown his way. You know, at first I was thinking this is going to be a big problem if the map, you know, fails and someone is 7 tiles away from another major civ. But I think we've determined that that is just such a rare scenario that it's not really of concern. And he included the toggle to auto fail the map, which to throw my 2 cents into, I think we can just probably remove that based on how rare this scenario is, because there are a lot of people that use these mods outside of CPL and will want to use these mods outside of CPL. So if we can make it less CPL centric, that's always a good thing in my eyes. So let's see, what were some other concerns I had? Recently, I had concerns with the number of remap requests we were going to get, because Desert was not reduced in his version, but it was reduced in the BBS version. We actually saw that yesterday when we tried the version before the latest update that has the desert shrinked, and we got a remap request right away. And we had a bunch of civs that had massive deserts right near them that just made that whole part of the map unusable. So I think that concern's been addressed. He basically used the same numbers that we were using in BBS, the current version of BBS. And so I don't think that's an issue anymore. So the major issues for me were we were going to see more arguments and more remaps with this version, but it sounds like we will get less of those or the same number, worst case.
Hello, Waza, and welcome.
Hi.
We just had like a 30-minute talk with Jack about the new BBS, and he basically ran down the changes he made. I'm not sure exactly if you're familiar with them, with all of them.
I assume I know what most of them are.
I know a few weeks ago you told me about some concerns you had with your BBS and how it could be improved, but can we start from there?
I mean, the only concern I have for BBS was the fact that Russia and Mali don't always spawn next to their preferred terrain. But I mean, that's true for pretty much a lot of the civs. They don't always spawn next to where they're supposed to, which sucks. Like, even in the current game I'm in, we have a person that's playing England, and they didn't spawn on the coast. They spawned, like, right next to it, which I find really weird, because that usually never happens. Other than that, I was fine with my mod. Sometimes you'd get the crash, but I mean, it's pretty infrequent. Well, I only play as one map. I don't know about the other map.
Well, from what I understand and what I've noticed, I do have some examples also on the stream right now with some screenshots side by side on the same map seed. The mod is basically changing a little bit of the terrain around the spawn. It also changes it averages the production and the food you have of all the players, but with a minimum threshold as well. And I don't think it's actually guaranteed. As actually Jack told us that it's not guaranteed to spawn in, let's say Mali spawns in desert, and I also think there is a problem if let's say Mali always spawns in desert, or Russia always spawns in desert, because we're gonna end up again starting to ban them every game, which is not fun.
I mean, if that's the case, you just nerf some aspect of them so that they're not as...
Yeah, we're gonna end up in that scenario again, so...
That's fine. If something becomes overpowered, you nerf it. And I mean, it's up to whether or not we think that Russia deserves to always spawn in that kind of situation.
Do you have some questions for Jack?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I've been watching what he has done, so I wouldn't say I'm unaware of what he's been doing.
And
Well, we don't seem to have any questions from the viewers, although we seem to have quite a few viewers. So I guess we'll just go on to the next topic.
Well, the next topic in my list would have been the civilization leaderboard that we implemented once we changed to the new Glico system, and I think Code is the better person between us to talk about it.
Sure. So basically, after every game's reported, sorry,
Air raid.
it's gonna take the average. It's gonna take whatever place they were in. Like, here, let me put you down 1 second. So let's say you're Scythia and you came in 5th place. What it's going to do is it's going to add 5th place to an array of all the places that Scythia has ever placed in. It's going to calculate an average place, and it's also going to do the same thing with the rating of the player that played them. So it's going to take whatever skill rating that player had, add it to the array for that civ, and calculate an average. And then it's going to update the leaderboard at that point. So some interesting takeaways were that Germany and Japan are played like every single game. They are just flying away with how much they're actually used. So they're super popular civs. Sweden's one of the least popular ones. Another interesting takeaway is Macedon is played by a lot of what seems like higher, or actually I think it was lower skilled players and not done well with. And so it's interesting to see those kind of permutations that you can extract from the data.
I noticed it's a lot different than some good players actually think about the civilizations. Maybe I can take a look at the rankings on the Civ leaderboard and tell us about how he sees it different from the teamers, let's say, perspective.
Where is this?
Yeah, and by the way, it's only taking into account free-for-all and duel games, because it's hard to say like, well, this Civ was on a team, and I guess the main reason why we didn't include it is because you would be giving a 2nd place and a 1st place for all of those games, and it would throw off the average placements.
Yeah, of course.
Is it the Civ leaderboard tab? Is that
Yes.
what we're talking about?
Yes.
So Georgia's number 1, Mali, Maori, Egypt.
Yes.
Norway is number 5.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. There are some surprises on the leaderboard, and that's why.
That's probably a direct result of the continents and islands map being played in FFA.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
weird.
there's a lot of factors that go into it. It depends on who's actually playing it and how good they are at playing that Civ. So it's still very early in the process. We've only been using this system and the Civ leaderboard for about 5 weeks. So this is the type of leaderboard that's going to need just tons of data to normalize. But what's really interesting is that Georgia has been number 1 pretty much since we started.
It is a pretty powerful Civ to sim and to get culture victory, to defend yourself, to go to war. Overall, I think it's a good Civ. But I know there are players that don't think that way, maybe.
I think it's trash.
Exactly. Just like
I hated the changes that took place to that city.
Are you gonna use this to then potentially change or nerf or buff some of the civilization if you see they are too low on the leaderboard?
I don't have any intentions at this time of using it that way. This is more informational. I thought with us switching to a new database and a new system, we should just collect as much information as possible and try to think about what we could potentially collect. And so if we're collecting it, why not display it? It seems somewhat interesting to me, but with the BBG updates ramping down, and I'm not sure you can fully trust this data, I don't know if we should necessarily be making changes based on it.
I think it's awesome, but that's more like the data scientist speaking. I love that. I didn't know we had this option.
Poor Eleanor of France has only been played 18 times.
Yes.
Well,
It's 'cause she's like a shittier counterpart to the rest of them. Like you have the aspect of being able to convert a city, but how often does someone get the chance to do it? Not very. So
honestly, I've seen last week in a novice game, I've seen a player do with Eleanor that a total conversion of a Macedon. Because Macedon was behind the mountains, but really close to Eleanor's cap. So he couldn't actually get to his cap. So he just started putting spies in the closest cities and then starting to, lower the loyalty and increase the do the project. And it was flipping a city every 5 turns. It was like amazing to see.
yeah, I mean, there's times where it'll work, but for the most part, loyalty should never be a problem. Unless there's like weird circumstances where you're like in a dark age and they're in the golden age.
And Michael, that's another great example of people aren't necessarily playing Eleanor France, but maybe someone kind of unlocks the way to play them and they become more popular because of that. It's something that could potentially happen.
The meta definitely changes when people find out new strategies. Like Inca, I think one of the Russian guys was the one who initially figured it out. Well, he made it popular. I don't know if I could say he figured it out. But if you pick Earth Goddess on, all the mountain tiles are always considered breathtaking, so all the mountain tiles always give you the 2 faith, which is huge.
And we found out firsthand actually the power of the Ottomans the other day, who happens to be in last place on this leaderboard. Michael, do you want to?
The Ottomans are extremely powerful. It's just no one likes playing them for some reason because it's like a one-trick. You have one strategy and that's it. You rush muskets and then you go attack someone.
It's extremely effective. I tried defending with Japan on the coast, Defender of the Faith, double victor, and I still couldn't do it. I was still like 20 because I was at samurais instead of like field cannons or cuirassiers. It was gross. I cannot,
Yeah, it seems extremely powerful.
maybe we can look into that with the BBG, or have you guys not thought about that?
No, I mean, at this point, unless there's something just that needs to be changed, there's no updates or discussion about updates.
Okay, so we will have
and the main reason for that is because it's become tinkering over time. You've been tinkering this way, tinkering that way, and just making all these minor changes, and people's biases set in, and unfortunately, it becomes a never-ending process.
Yeah, we also had that period of about a month or month and a half in which you were making updates, or someone was making updates to every civilization, and we were changing the meta every few days. It was really weird to play.
Yeah, and although we get complaints about that, I've also gotten compliments that that's what's needed to keep the game fresh and things like that. But I mean, overall, right now, the game seems like it's in a pretty decent place. Faith is very important, culture is very important, science is very important. Diplomatic victory can or cannot happen in certain situations. Every civ has some sort of thing that they can do to succeed in a game. Everything's within, nothing is off limits.
I tend to agree with that. We did have some complaints about culture victory being too overpowered, as in it comes way earlier than let's say science victory. I'm not sure exactly if that's the case, because at the same time it's much more easier to defend against it. So you just have to know how.
I think that would be the correct argument there. While it can come quicker, it also has a lot of ways to slow it down, whereas science victory is more linear and based on your own progress, whereas culture victory is sort of non-linear and based on what everyone else's progress is.
Yeah. Also, Jack, you wanted to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's actually funny that you mentioned that you receive a comment from people saying that they actually like the fact that there were modification because when I started to have like this BBS project and so on, one thing that they told me is that that's great because we won't get much update on BBG for a while, and they were like, it's not that they were thinking that having the game set in perfect balance would mean the communities would die, but I guess probably the most competitive players or the one that are kind of chasing new content, probably the one that are still students and plays a lot and are not working and don't understand what it implies in terms of maintaining a mod and everything. They were kind of implying that if we have like changes every now and then, it would be very positive for the community.
Well, at the same time, Civilization is not an easy game to, first of all, learn and second of all, play. Especially with it's extremely time consuming, with an average of 4 to 5 hours of gameplay on each match. I think it's one of the very time consuming games around. So most people won't have the time to learn it in a very effective way. If you change the specifics of the game every few weeks, it's gonna get really hard for them to actually set into a competitive mood, let's say. But I do agree on the most hardcore players that like the changes and want to see how fast they adapt to the new conditions, especially respective to the other good players that they know and how fast they can get an advantage. I do agree they would be very happy if that is happening.
It's actually amazing to see. I thought that was a good. I would say not good, but like I knew how to play Civ, and then I arrived here, and I played, especially when I was younger, a lot of Civ 3 mostly. I just arrived, just building my little, my little empire, and then I see 6 horsemen that just run through my my cities and just destroy everything. I was like, you can't do that. So yeah, I mean it's very competitive compared to the normal game, I would say, the more casual game.
We also had at some point a breaking between the normal game, the FFAs, and the teamers, and Waza was one of the ones that pushed this. Can you explain more about the teamer?
For like private teamers, like why I
Yes.
want private. The private teamers is mostly because I wanted the freedom to be able to kick players whenever I wanted. I didn't want the 10-minute thing. But that does stem from the fact that when a lot of the new players want to play, they're always like, yeah, I'm good, I can handle myself. And then they get in and they have no idea what they're doing. They've played single player, or they've played with their friends like nonchalantly. And when they get into the real game and they're into people who've played this game far too much, they just get rolled. And it's not fun for the people that are having to protect them, and it's not fun for them at all, and they just die. So it's like, I wanted an environment where I had the freedom of knowing who was going to be in my game to ensure that the veteran players could enjoy themselves without feeling like I'm wasting my time here because the person's just going to die every time they join my lobby.
So how do new players actually get into the private teamers? Because of course everybody wants to play with the big boys, and we all know that you learn much faster when you play with the big boys than when you play with the small ones.
So my philosophy has always been, get your understanding from playing free for all. So at least play free for all enough where you can handle yourself, where you know that you have to build units at certain times, you know what districts have priorities, you know all that stuff. You need to know the basics before you throw yourself into a game where people are rolling you because they understand timings and what's important. So like we've allowed people to play all the time who are new, or at least new-ish. If you play a game and you perform extremely poorly, it's unlikely that we'll let you play again because we don't want to waste our time and your time. But I mean, if that player were to play free-for-all a bunch and they get better and we hear about it and someone can vouch for them, because a lot of the Teamers players actually do play free-for-all as well. I strictly only play Teamers, but a lot of them play both. So if we were to hear that, like, oh yeah, this guy's gotten a lot better, that's a lot more likely we'll be like, okay, he can play, and we'll see if he's ready to play with more veteran players.
Yeah, I would like to remind everyone that we do have 2 times a week at least hosted novice games that will be with some coaches in them. Like they will be hosted by veteran players that can talk you, well, decent veteran players that will talk you into, and you also have access to much more experienced players. When you tag a coach, for example, use the tag coach, you can ask your questions away in novice chat. You can also private message them directly and ask them for different kinds of coaching methods, like backseat gaming, like doing an analysis on your recorded gameplay or stuff like that. You can also ask us here in the QA show. You can submit screenshots or videos that we will use to put them up on the screen and talk about a certain scenario. So I think that would benefit everyone. At the same time, we have 3 more minutes to go, and I wanted to first.
There's a question in your Twitch chat about Tomb Raider's suggested game mode. I'm not actually up on this myself, but if someone in here is,
I think that might be a good idea to save for next week. It's a pretty in-depth discussion about a kind of a Diplo minus scenario.
Is that something I read about the War Plus? Is it similar to Red Phoenix's War Plus mode?
He claims it is. I'm not sure how much it is, but it's essentially a war game where you're allowed to talk and discuss with people. There's some other stipulations and details that some people want to work out, like whether you're allowed to trade for luxuries or for strategics, and if we should set monetary values for them, or if we should just have no trading whatsoever. But essentially, people want to be social in the game, but they want to not have the kind of protections and people requesting friendships and long-term alliances right at the get-go of the game when they meet each other. And also there's a degree of self-reliance embedded in it, where you have to fund your own wars, you have to fund your own strategics to upgrade into swords and things of that.
I mean, essentially normal FFAs, or at least how it should be. Yeah. I guess, actually, I want to first make myself much more comfortable in talking about that scenario. I'm not exactly familiar with it. I also did notice Zati coming in here, and I wanted to welcome him. Hello, Zati. If you wanna ask us something, or if you wanna tell us something, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for, I guess, introducing me a little bit. I just say briefly, since you mentioned the novice games, I am one of the people who host novice games every week. I do games every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and I believe that's 12 a.m. on Thursday Central Time for anybody from the European countries. It's settler rank right now. I'm working on hosting some other games for higher ranks, but as of right now, I'm just doing some novice games. So come on out and play with me.
Yeah, that's great, man, and thank you for the announcement. I gotta wrap this up. It's been an hour. I'm really happy we had this discussion with Jack and Waza and everyone involved, especially Code. We'll see you next week, and if you have any questions, you can ask them on the QA show or on the stream, or send them directly to me, and we'll have a topic next week as well. Thank you guys, and see you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Bye.